Testing. Oh. Good evening, everybody. Could you please grab a seat or take a seat, please, and we can commence our opening of our hui this evening. Kia ora. I'm going to open up with a word of prayer, a karakia, to acknowledge Rangi Nui and Papa Tūnuku, and also the kaupapa for tonight, and also a mihi, an extended welcome to all of you who have come tonight, and also to our very special guests that are sitting in the front row here. Kia ora mai tātou. Me noi tātou. E te kaihanga e o matua kore ke konei mātu e mihi aka whetai ki a koe. Mō tā tātou hui huinga i tēnei pō. Tō manaakitanga ki te karanga ki tā tātou whānau, I arahi nina I a rātou ko te tūmai I roto I tēnei whare. Nā reira manakitia mai, arahi ngia, I tā mātou kaupapa, me tā tātou ngā manuhiri, kai kōrero ko te tūmai I tēnei pō, te mihi ākanera ki a koe mō tēnā, I roto I tō tātou ariki. Nā reira e te atua aroha atu, te whawhaitanga ki tā wāhi. Te whawhaitanga ki a Iran and USA, ko tino aroha atu ki ngā whānau, ngā tamariki, me ngā wahine kaumātua kuia. Nā reira, ko te tūmai tēnei wā ki te arahi a rātou ngā kai arahi I runga I te manaakitanga mo te maunga rongo. Mihi nei rā ki a koe mō tēnā I roto I tō tātou ariki. Amen. So as we gather here tonight, we just said a prayer to give thanks for the journey that you've made to be here tonight and to support this wonderful kaupapa, and also to acknowledge the conflict and war that's taken place overseas. So our memories and sorrow is with the families and with the elders and the kuia and our mokopuna who are suffering as a result of the conflict that's happening. So as we gather here tonight, our memory and our prayers are with them. Nā reira, kia ora mai tātou. Nā reira, te mea tūtahi māku e mihi nei rā ki tō tātou matu I te rangi. Nā reira, koe e te timatanga me te hakamutunga o ngā mea katoa. Nā reira, I ngā mana, I ngā reo, koutou I ngā rangatira ko te tūmai. Haere mai rā ki tēnei whare. Haere mai rā ki te whenua. Haere mai rā ki tēnei wāhi. Ka hari, ka koa te ngākau te tūmai I a koutou I tēnei wā. Piki mai rā, kake mai, nau mai haere mai. Nā reira koutou I ngā manuhiri tuarangi I mihi nei rā ki a koutou. Te haerenga mai ki te tautoko ake te karanga, ki a koutou te kai kōrero I tēnei pō. Nā ke konei tā tātou whānau, ke mui a koutou, nā ki te kōrero ki a rātou. Nā reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Te tuarua e mihi aroha ki o tātou ngā tini aitua, ngā tini mate, nā reira haere atu rā koutou haere. Nā reira huri noa ki a tātou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. So we've got some special guests below us here, so I'm going to ask everybody to stand so that you can sing my song, and it's called Te Aroha. Te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi mari e, tātou e, ano, te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi mari e, tātou e. So we all need love, we all need hope, but most of all right now, we need peace. Kia ora mai tātou, I noho. Kia ora.
O tēnā tātou I te whānau, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Tuatahi, nau I whakawāte te huarahi kia pai ai tā tātou wāhi, ngā mihi nui ai te rangatira. E te iwi, kua hui hui mai nei ki konei I te pō whakahirihere nei ngā mihi nui, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Hiuri tēnei no ngā timutunga no ngaitahu hoki ko Miriama Kamo, tōku ingoa. Nā reire tiwi, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. So kia ora and good evening, everyone. It is wonderful to see you all here tonight. In fact, we would really like to say thank you because as soon as we put the invitation out, we immediately got huge numbers of people signing up, and it's just awesome to see you all here proving that art matters here in Tāmaki Makaurau. And so on that note, we've proven the point. Discussion closed. Thank you. And good night. No, but seriously, it means so much to have you all in the room. A big mihi too to everybody who's joining us online via the Auckland Conversations website. I am Miriama Kamo and I'm privileged to be facilitating our conversation this evening. Now, events like this are part of Auckland Conversations. It's a series designed to bring people together to think more deeply about the challenges and opportunities facing Tāmaki Makaurau. And tonight we're here to talk about something that sits right at the heart of our city, and that is the arts. Now we know the arts don't just enrich our lives, they shape who we are. The arts are about seeing ourselves reflected, deepening identity and building belonging. To better understand the value being created, Auckland Council partnered with Dovetail Consulting on the Arts Matters evaluation. This is research that looks at how investment in the arts supports participation, strengthens communities, and creates pathways for artists to thrive. So soon we'll be hearing more about that before we head into our discussion, but very quickly we'll get the housekeeping out of the way. Bathrooms are located on the left-hand side of the room facing the stage. In the event of an emergency, you'll be directed either to the upper grass terrace just outside the room or to the Merrill Drive footpath at the rear of the Aotea Centre via the back of house route. So, of course, we just follow the instructions of the Duty Operations Manager, who is the Chief Warden. And also, if you could please just make sure that your phones are all turned to silent. Feel free, obviously, to keep them on. We'd like you to engage and share this on social media. And also, you will be able to submit questions via Slido, which I'll explain how to do very soon. But to begin our evening, I'd like to invite Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson to the stage to offer some opening remarks.
Ena mana, ena reo, e rau rangatira mā, tēnā te mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'd like to start first by acknowledging Richard and Miriama for bringing us together tonight, because it's really special. I think everyone knows that arts and music has been woven throughout my life. And because they have played such a pivotal role in who I am, I have never believed they are simply ornaments or nice-to-haves for our city. To me, they are the rhythm section that holds the whole arrangement together. They keep us in time with one another. For when creativity thrives, communities find their harmony, and when we invest in the arts, we invest in community and belonging. Here in Tāmaki Makaurau and across Aotearoa, creativity shapes who we are, how we connect, and how we thrive. Nationally, the arts strengthen our identity, our well-being, our sense of community, of innovation, and even our economic resilience. And here, in one of the most ethnically diverse cities on the planet, the arts help us see ourselves, understand each other, and celebrate the unique identity of Tāmaki Makaurau. From Te Ai Māori to Moana Oceania, to the many cultures that call our city home, arts and culture makes cities livable. They give us colour, they give us vibrancy and pride in self and in place. Council's investment in arts and culture directly supports our major council strategies. Toi Whātiki, we have an arts and culture strategy. The Auckland Plan 2050, outcomes of belonging and participation. Māori identity and wellbeing, opportunity and prosperity. Ngā Hapori Moho Moho, our Thriving Communities Framework, and Tamaki Ora, our Māori outcomes performance measures. Through sector consultation, we heard a clear message. Auckland needs to better express the value of arts and culture, and that's a core shift for Toi Whātiki. To support that shift, Council partnered, as Miriama mentioned, with Dovetail Consulting on the Arts Matter evaluation. And the findings are powerful. They show that targeted investments leads to stronger participation and engagement, uplifted identities, greater cohesion, more equitable outcomes, and real pathways for artists. These impacts reinforce exactly what our strategies aim to achieve, which you'll hear more about shortly. And importantly, they align with our national strategy, Amplify, investing for maximum impact, nurturing talent, and reducing barriers for growth. Now, some of you were with me last week when we celebrated the completion of the new Auckland Art Gallery restoration, or I should say the old Art Gallery restoration, the new bit of the old. I'm ambitious to see Auckland become the greatest arts and cultural city in the Southern Hemisphere. I said that last week, and I'm going to say it this week, and I'm going to say it next week, and I'm going to say it the week after. Because that ambition is grounded in community aspiration and in the clear benefits that creativity delivers for our people and for our future. Across the motu, we know that people visit, invest in, and stay in places where they feel represented, where they feel safe, and where they feel connected. And the arts help create those conditions. Investing in creativity strengthens livability, supports economic vitality, and shapes a future-focused Aotearoa when culture leads, not lags. Arts matters because people matter. A culturally vibrant Tamaki Makaurau is essential to our region's future and the story we tell as a nation. So let's champion creativity, not just as a luxury, but as a foundation for belonging, for identity, for innovation and community resilience. And let's imagine together a Tamaki Makaurau that leads with culture and makes space for every voice in the chorus. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of those voices tonight. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Deputy Mayor Simpson. Thank you so much. So tonight's conversation begins with a short presentation from Adrian Field of Dovetail Consulting, who led, as we know, the Arts Matters research. After Adrian's presentation, he'll be joined on stage by a panel, and we'll move to a wider conversation about what these findings mean for the future of the arts in Tamaki Makaurau, particularly in light of the ambition that Desley Simpson has for our city. We want you to be part of this conversation. So throughout the discussion, you can submit questions via Slido. If you don't have your phone in hand, now might be the time to do that, so I can tell you how to download the app. Very simple. You just go to slido.com and enter the event code #ArtsMatter. There we go, all your directions there. And then just type in your question. If you have any trouble accessing Slido, you can go to the back of the room and someone from the team will help you sort that out. A wee reminder that we're looking for questions, not statements. We want to include as many voices as possible. Auckland Conversations events are also designed to be accessible and inclusive, so a recording of tonight's discussion along with captions and a transcript will be available on the Auckland Conversations website in the next few days. Okay, let's begin our conversation about why the arts truly matter. So tonight we're exploring the role that arts play in shaping the development, identity and sustainability of Tāmaki Makaurau, because as we know, the arts are far more important than just entertainment or creative output. In fact, I dare say the term the arts is a little triggering for some outside the sector, and that's probably because we've had to defend them more than arguably any other sector. And that's because for those disengaged, it's easy to forget that the arts is not monolithic. It is, in fact, made up of many forms, and within each is the ability to generate remarkable economic outcomes and build cultural and social power. So our art forms are far more than what we see at the end. They support directly and indirectly many other sectors beyond the extraordinary well-being and creative outcomes which we'll talk about tonight, and which Desley has spoken about as well. A stage show, for example, needs builders. A theatre show needs electricians. Art venues need catering. As Auckland continues to grow, the arts represent something powerful, a resource that helps to shape our future. They are the seat of our identity and well-being as a nation. Now, to prove all of that, and at the centre of tonight's discussion is the Arts Matters research, which highlights the value that arts participation and investment bring across cultural identity, community well-being and the economy. So to start us off, I'm going to ask Adrian Field from Dovetail Consulting to join us on stage. And as he does, I'll read your bio out. So Adrian is the director and founder of Dovetail, a consultancy focused on advancing the public good, working with communities and organisations in Aotearoa and internationally. He brings more than 25 years of experience in research and evaluation, spanning consulting, academia, the not-for-profit sector, and both central and local government. It's a bit like when you're at school and somebody may just stand up while everybody's saying happy birthday. Nearly there, Adrian. His work focuses on helping organisations make well-informed decisions about funding, programs and services using research to support better outcomes for communities. So Adrian is going to share some of the key findings from the Arts Matter research, which will set the scene for our discussion. So please join me in welcoming Adrian Field. Kia ora, Adrian.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Adrian Field tōku ingoa no Inarangi me Airana oku tūpuna kei Dovetail ahau e mahi ana. Thank you, Miriama, Deputy Mayor and Mātua for such warm introductions for today, and it's a real privilege to be able to be here. I'm Adrian Field. I'm a co-director at Dovetail. We're a public good-focused research and evaluation company. We work across the community, arts, social and other sectors. And in brief, we look at services, programs and initiatives and make sense of the outcomes that they are bringing for people and communities. I'm here to briefly, I think I've only got 10 minutes, to present on the findings from the research we've done over the past 6 to 8 months, or actually a bit more than a year. But first of all, we'd like to express our deepest gratitude to all who took part in the research, from the participating case studies, from community partners, and of course to Auckland Council for both commissioning the evaluation and being very active collaborators in the design and sense making. My thanks too to my colleagues Kat Rooker, Amanda Hunter and Georgia Parslow, who took part in the research with us. So we were commissioned to undertake this research, looking at the value that arts investments by Council offer communities through the lens of 6 case studies grounded in the communities of the region. In undertaking this research, we applied what's called a value for investment approach. Now, this takes a very broad view of value, including but not limited to economic value, and it sees value as something that matters to people. And this demands a view that brings in many different perspectives. Oh, there we go. I won't read out this table, it's okay. We applied a mixed methods approach using multiple sources. It's really just to show we did a lot of stuff. Both qualitative and quantitative, a mixture of direct outreach by the research team and analysing existing data and reporting that were available for each case study. This table sort of looks at the approaches that we did for each case study with a huge array of people who took part in different forms of data gathering. These included artists, producers, program leads, venue staff, audiences and stall holders. It was a real labour of love and a lot of fun to be part of this over the past wee while. So I'll be discussing each of the case studies shortly, but this diagram highlights that we looked at a diverse range of arts initiatives, organisations and projects. There was a deliberate effort here to look at initiatives that are a bit more outside the mainstream rather than established professional arts organisations. We looked at art in a broad sense, encompassing festivals and performances, youth talent and development, infrastructure and spaces, public art and placemaking, and cultural heritage and identity. And across all of these, there was a council role in offering sector support and partnerships. So I'm now going to run through each of the case studies and then make some general observations as well. So first up, Basement Theatre, just over there. A multidisciplinary arts venue, part funded by council, that supports the development of emerging performance artists based here in the central city. Some of the key areas of value that were demonstrated by Basement were platforming diverse work, supporting emerging artists to graduate to professional practice, and fostering economic activity in the arts through learning the systems of developing and marketing a show. It's really been a groundswell for a lot of people that we see prominent in the arts sector now. Then we have Pride Fest Out West. It's a series of community initiatives held in West Auckland, and it's supported by council over Pride Month. It works across over 20 different venues, and the value that we found it offers includes amplifying artists in the rainbow community to a wider audience, creating safe spaces for rainbow community arts and performance, and contributing to informed and engaged citizens. There we are. Te Manu Karewa, it's a semi-permanent art installation based just outside the Manurewa Library. Auckland Council commissioned Jaden Flavel, an emerging artist from Ngāti Te Ata Wairohua. Te Manu Karewa is more than a sculpture. It's a multimedia installation, and it conveys the history and legends of the area grounded in the setting that it's located. And some of the value to emerge from this included the partnered approach to investment, which included capacity development and connection with council and people in the area, enabling iwi storytelling and fostering intergenerational exchange in telling the story and whakapapa behind the sculpture. Then we have Stand Up, Stand Out. It's an annual secondary school performance competition led by Auckland Council and running for over 35 years now. It stays relevant year after year. And it promotes a wide range of performing artists by young people in the region. What was really evident from Stand Up, Stand Out included the way it could foster cultural expression by young people. It forges a pipeline for young people to the creative industries and provides professional opportunities from developing performance experience. The Chinese Dragon Boat Festival, it's a recent initiative led by the West Auckland Chinese Association, but it's one that promotes a centuries-old tradition. Auckland Council's investment was primarily in event management capacity building to enable the association's leadership to plan and undertake the festival themselves each year, including health and safety, parking and traffic control, and marketing. All those essential things that you need to make an event happen. Working with the Corbin Estate, the festival delivered value through sharing cultural art forms from Chinese and many other cultures, building event coordination capability, and ultimately bringing generations together in a diverse range of performances. Te Oro is a multifunction community and arts facility based in Glen Innes, and it supports quite a wide range of creative activity. Some of the value we saw coming from that are in nurturing emerging leaders in the arts and other fields, strengthening artistic practice and artistic networks, and also supporting the economic activity of the area through its integration within the Glen Innes precinct. So those are the case studies. I just want to talk a bit more about the framework we were working within. So in the design of the evaluation, we collaboratively built with council teams a value framework to provide a structured approach to understanding value. We identified 3 areas of value, and each had a range of criteria that we developed. First of all, there was stewardship of resources to enable arts and culture. This is about how Council manages, supports and holds accountability for arts investment. And the resources that Council brings are much more than just funding. There are also a range of other supports such as venues, relational connections and capability development. Then we talked about building artistic, social and cultural capital. And we deliberately used the idea of capital here because when you invest in capital, you get a return over time. But to get that return, you have to nurture and maintain it. So this looks at different types of capital that is being developed and sustained through arts investment: cultural capital, social capital, relational capital. These go beyond just the delivery of arts and culture activities, but also look at community and iwi relationships. They showcase mātauranga and Ngā Toi Māori and foster leadership in the arts as well. And finally, generating social and economic value. These are the end results of arts investments that support communities and the wider city in different ways. They encompass the growth of Te Ao Māori, cohesive communities, economic growth, sense of place, and an engaged citizenry. We explored each initiative individually, but we also looked at the collective value that Council Arts Investment brings, which I'll now turn to. Okay, there's a lot to take in here. It's what we call a spider diagram, and it's a way of showing the extent to which Council's arts investment, through the lens of the case studies, is meeting a range of criteria for assessing value, ranging from below expectations to excellence. I should say first up, there were no cases of below expectations. There was a good spread across the others. And again, I won't go into this in detail, but what we can see is that arts investment was delivering value to varying degrees across all domains. And there were some key areas of excellence. In stewardship of resources, it was in diversity of programming and overall management of the resources. In artistic and social capital, it could be seen in building community connection and cohesion. And in social and economic value, it was in civic engagement, reflection of local identity, and building pride and vibrancy. So, in terms of investing for success, some of the key learning to come from this were, first of all, diverse investment types. The types of support and investments made by Council in arts and culture programs extended beyond operational funding and included staff, resources and support, lease of venues and facilities, rent subsidies and capability building. Sustaining strong, mutually beneficial relationships with program partners is key to leveraging the most value from investments and often involves brokering connections with other organisations or parts of Council. For Ngā Toi Māori and Māori ownership, it was evident in case studies that drew on these that centering Māori ownership in design is a key enabler of art that resonates with and has the support of wider Māori communities in iwi. Auckland Council is also often a critical funding stream, but the reality for arts organisations is that their sustainability, even at a project level, often depends on securing co-investment funding from a whole range of sources. And then lastly, community co-design, where we have activities and venues that drew on community input, and co-design also showed a high level of cohesion and participation with their communities, whether ethnic, geographic or communities of interest. Finally, we looked at how we can generate more value from arts investment, and key areas were in terms of core funding. For all organisations and projects we met with, there were challenges of short-term one-off funding. The question we have is, can funding be used in ways that enable arts organisations to plan and innovate through increased use of flexible and multi-year funding? Capacity development was a need for many, with challenges in navigating council systems, timelines, funding sources and milestones. With iwi relationships, we found that systems are not always an easy fit, and other opportunities to create approaches that work better for all concerned. The evidence base that many arts initiatives relied on were quite limited, and we could see lots of opportunities, speaking as an evaluator, to build better monitoring systems, even if they were just simple feedback approaches to be better able to tell their own story of value and impact. There may also be more opportunities to develop local leadership in the arts through residencies, internships, employment pathways, and enabling growth and succession of the arts in the city. And lastly, while economic benefits are not always central to arts initiatives, are there opportunities to get better at identifying the different economic benefits, like business investment, vendor participation, and career development? So, last of all, I've presented a lot here in a very brief time, but we can see that from these case studies, arts are a key part of the fabric and identity of Tamaki Makaurau. They link landscapes with the act of placemaking and weaving in the history and cultures of the region. They contribute to a sense of community and community connection. They bring to life and foster mātauranga Māori and Ngā Toi Māori. They support career and leadership development. And lastly, they all in their own way contribute to the creative economy of the region. Thank you, everyone. Ngā mihi nui.
Are we good? All right, there we go. Okay, so Adrian, thank you so much. So appreciate it. What stood out to you most during the research process?
I think for me, one of the things that really stood out was what my colleague Kat Ruka talked about, was the hidden layers of investment that happen in any arts initiative. And if I think perhaps of Jaden Flavel's Te Manu Karewa, it was more than just the funding. There was these other levels of investment that came in. His grandfather gifted him a swamp kauri to be able to carve the sculpture. He connected throughout his iwi to bring the stories and legends to life. There was the connections that council made to other parts to actually get through the design and the installation, the physical hard yards that go through to making a public installation happen. So there are all these things that go on that exist beyond just the funding themselves. It was quite striking, really, yeah.
And what about the most surprising thing?
I think, too, in a related way, the way in which targeted funding was made to sit alongside things. If I think of Stand Up, Stand Out, where you have quite a small amount of funding, but you have industry partnerships. You have partnerships with Auckland Live, with venue support. You bring all these different pieces together and you get something that is of lasting impact.
Awesome, thank you. That was great. Okay, so what we're going to do, we'll get you to stay here and we're going to introduce the rest of our panellists. All right, everybody, so I would like to invite the rest of our speakers to the stage. So please join me in welcoming Emily Trent, Head of Arts and Culture, Auckland Council. Hamiora Bailey, Director of Auckland Pride. And Arawhiti Kono, Audience Strategist, Consultant and Award-winning Writer. And Helena Keeley, Managing Performing Arts, Auckland Live. O ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. It's lovely to have you all on stage and thank you for being part of this really important conversation. One of the things I love about these conversations is that arts means something different to all of us, whether that's music, theatre, literature, festivals, public art, or the stories that we tell about ourselves as a city. So I'd like to start with something simple. Can you each introduce yourselves and perhaps share a moment when the arts genuinely changed something for you, a moment where you realised their power? We'll start down the end there with you, Helena.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Helena Keeley, tōku wingua. I'm Helena Keeley, Manager for Performing Arts at Auckland Live. It is a very hard question to answer, Miriama, because the arts have been a rhythmic section my entire life also, in the words of the esteemed speaker earlier. I have been part of the art sector since I was extremely small, and that has shown me the incredible connection and cohesion that it allows to communities and to individuals alike. So if I had to pick one thing, and it's very hard to do that, I would think back to a time when I was very small and I realised that everybody was allowed to dance in the street. At a street party when I was probably about 10 years old that my parents took me to, and that was a revelation because I turned around and made that into my career, dancing in the street. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Anna.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Anna Rafiti Connell tōku ingoa. I also have been very lucky to essentially been involved with the arts since I was very small, but I do have one very distinct moment. I grew up in Hamilton and my parents drove us up to Auckland It's a bit daggy, but to see Cats at the St James Theatre. And I must have been about 7. And I was so awestruck that I lay down in the back seat of the car, probably with no seatbelt on. It was, it was the 80s or the early 90s. And I didn't talk for the entire ride home. And I was just utterly blown away that people could do that with their bodies and that they could hold an audience in their hand like that. And it all came flooding back to me, that sense of awestruck, when I sat just over there in the basement car park after Shane Bosher's production of Angels in America. And I did the full double act, so I'd been sitting in there for about 6 hours, and I came out and I was like a cliched movie character where I couldn't get my key into my car because I was crying so hard, and I sat in my car for half an hour by myself like that kid who wouldn't talk to her parents about what she thought about cats, and just bawled for half an hour after that play. And yeah, that kind of sense of I guess feeling connected with what's going on in the room, but also that sort of emotional stimulation and connection, and that sense of elevation that you've just seen something extraordinary. That's probably what drives my involvement in the arts.
Oh, it's beautiful, Anna. Thank you so. It actually reminds me of when I was a kid and I went and saw Jesus Christ Superstar, and afterwards my mother took me backstage and I was like, oh, meeting Jesus. Emily.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Emily Trent Tako Ingawa. I'm Head of Arts and Culture for Auckland Council. Wonderful to hear both of your reflections. There's so many ideas and experiences to pull from. Also grew up through the arts with a mother who was an art teacher, and have had the privilege of having lots of different types of interactions through the course of my career in arts, culture, and heritage more broadly. But thinking about this and the topic of the evening, my mind goes to when I was a water ballerina with a local performing arts group. And it was during a very difficult time in my life, some of those periods of performance, and being able to be in the water with these fellow ballerinas, connecting to each other through music and sound and touch and movement, created safety and belonging and something that felt bigger than myself. During that time in my life, and some of the friends that I made through that are my best friends today, over 10 years later, and being able to bring my son into that environment as well was really special. So the arts, I think, can save us and move us in ways nothing else can, and I've had that personal experience through dance and performing arts. So that's what I was thinking about. And also got to perform in the Parnell Baths under amazing pink lights, and that was so cool. So beautiful to connect to those spaces as well that we really cherish. And
gorgeous. And it does, there's a really strong theme coming through already about sort of generational way that arts works and goes through whakapapa, goes through our whānau, and how we can hand that love down. So ngā mihi, hami ora.
Tēnā tātou, a tēnei ko te kōpū arahi o te whenua, e tūmai nei, arairi tēnei no te rohe o Parihauraki, te moe hoanganui o tama te kapua, te taro o tika Māui, tuatahi, me mihi kā tika, kia koe te rangatira, mō tō karakia i rungi a mātou i tēnei pō, ai a tātou. Tēnā koe Ngāti Whātua, ki ngā tini me ngā manu o te rau o te kāhu pōkiri, o te kawau e mihi kauwana, kia koutou katoa, kia koe e whāia e mihi kauwana kia koe, mo tō i whakawhāriki hia nā framework, mo tō tātou nei kōrero, ai e kinei au tino āhuru mō waiki. Kia ora everybody, I'm Hamiora. Just wanted to acknowledge Ahika, Waihorotu, and the safety that I feel in this space. The arts is vulnerable, and leading in the arts is really vulnerable, and queer communities Takatapu and rainbow communities, the storytelling that we see brought to life through the festival is authentic. So I don't come alone tonight in that context, and I'm really grateful for the ushering and the safety. Thank you to Auckland Council for putting this on. Speaking to whakapapa, and the first time I guess I realised Te Kete Aronui was a driving force of being a descendant. My koro Pakariki Harrison and my nanny Hini Moana wove over 70 wharenui during the Kura Kaupapa movement. Wow. My uncle John Hovell taught, and my uncle Peter Boyd taught many kōwhaiwhai painters, and the esteemed Nigel Burrell, who went on to do Toitu Toiora. My whare tipuna Rā Kairua, who is that way across Te Kapa Moana, turns 30 in April. So I think growing up under those heke in that whare, knowing who I come from and how they contributed to our cultural context was always, an investiture of whakapapa, but nothing quite sings like a wharenui during a real either intense time of mourning and tangihanga or a really beautiful celebration of life. So I think looking up at my Auntie Jill singing and kind of hearing all of these voices echo off the heke at my koropaki's tangi was definitely the first time that I was like, whoa. And now I love karaoke and I keep that tradition going really strong.
I see the connection.
It's a taonga tuku iho.
Oh, rawe. And I love that you mentioned Waihoro Tiu, because the story here is just so beautiful and so powerful. And I still have these fantasies that one day we'll daylight the stream and, change Queen Street up. All power to mana whenua on that front. Adrian.
Kia ora koutou, ko Adrian Field, tōku ingoa. I think for me with the arts, it's that giving of oneself that people do in whatever form of art they do, but also particularly in the performing arts, it's the connection that they create with those around them. I used to be in choirs, and you were never just singing your part. You were placing yourself in a group of people and making sure that you all had each other's back, and that you were in at the right place. And that point of connection with each other as well as with the audience, I think for me was quite a awakening moment that I hadn't appreciated until I did it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So do we need to be singing from the same song sheet when we look at arts in Tāmaki Makaurau?
I think diversity is what makes the arts in Tāmaki Makaurau the best, yeah. Yeah, we just want everyone to sing in harmony, that's all. Not exactly from the same sheet necessarily. Let me thank you all. As I said before, just awesome to have you all here on stage, and wonderful to hear your stories. Emily, I just want to start with you from a council perspective. As you considered the findings that Dovetail daylighted, what made you feel proud, or what made you pause and reflect?
So there were many aspects that made me proud and reflective, but I must lead with saying that I am so proud of the economic, community, and social value clearly demonstrated by the work of everybody profiled in this research. Undoubtedly, and we'll discuss this more on the panel, but this is such a formative body of work that pulls together why the arts matter. And as we heard in some of the intro speeches, this is something that is really important to have our stories strong around. And we have been in a position of what feels like defense time and time again. And so a way to kind of get ahead of that is to create a narrative together that we can all stand behind and see ourselves in and proudly lead out with. And so when I saw the final report and all through the drafting, I was like, yes, this is it, So first of all, I am so proud of everybody working in these spaces, working to drive these community impacts and show what we're doing together. When you think about some of the major challenges that we have on our doorstep in Tamaki Makaurau, they could not be more complex. And I think the solutions are going to demand arts and culture and creativity being right there in the ring to help us solve those. And we have to think about economic, social, and community impacts. When we hear, Trinity Ice, for example, as part of Pride Fest Out West, talking about how participating in this program of work gives visibility and voice to people who may otherwise be unseen, and how it provides a space for young people to see themselves and that there's a future. I mean, how much more powerful could we get? How much more important could this be? So I'm really proud to stand behind that, and I'm proud of the people who are doing that with me, many of them in this room. So that's definitely one. And I kind of just to go beyond that as well, what comes to the fore through the body of research is the importance of people and relationships, and that's within the organizations themselves, that's between the organizations that work together, that is within the relationships that we're brokering, the co-investment opportunities we're looking for, like Adrian spoke to, all of the hustling behind the scenes that goes on to bring these projects to life is actually about connecting as people around a kaupapa. So I feel so proud of the people I work with, and the people who are driving this sector day in, day out.
Thank you for that. Awesome, Emily. What we've done, we've sort of divided this up into 5 themes, and so we're going to talk about belonging, the way the arts connect us. We'll talk about well-being, how the arts sustain, how the arts employ us, the opportunities, how arts represent us, the voices, and also the future, so how arts will prepare us, and how we need to be prepared to support our arts communities. What I'd like to do, I mean, we know the arts is really important. We also know that there are challenges, and there are things that we do well, and there are things that we don't do so well. So we're going to talk about some of those things. And one of the things I want to start off with is, Anna, what makes art spaces truly function, the art space rather, truly function as a third space, somewhere where people can gather and connect, and are we losing those spaces?
Yeah, so the concept of the third space is a term that sociologist Ray Oldenburg coined, I think, in about 1989, and it's essentially the concept of the space that isn't your home or isn't your work, and where people can gather informally. And there's been quite a bit talked about around the loss of the third space in terms of the way that cities are designed, or the amount of time that people are spending commuting, or the amount of time that we're now spending staring at our phones. And a lot of it was exacerbated and accelerated by the pandemic. But I guess the idea of a third space is one that is designed around a sense of belonging, and sometimes that's something that occurs totally informally within a neighbourhood environment. I often think about growing up, we used to go to Mass every Sunday, grew up Catholic, and I didn't really care about what happened inside the church, forgive me, Father, but I cared deeply about what happened after, when all the kids ran around and swung off the statue of Jesus that was out the front of the church, and were probably responsible for why his hand fell off at one stage. But there was that, and my parents were part of that community as well, and we are more secular now. We don't have perhaps the sense of community and neighbourhood that we used to have. When I think about it in the context of the arts, I think libraries are an incredible example of that. But when I think about it around performing arts venues, I often think about the foyer and the way that before a show they're so full of buzz and anticipation, and when you get that mix of kind of great hospitality spaces and great places for people to sit and chat, there is a fantastic kind of feeling when you walk in the room that you are all part of a big influx of people going in to experience something together, even though you sort of, in most performing arts experiences, sit there totally silent in the dark. The thing that always gets me is that when you come out, our venue's empty so quickly. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that. And I know that there are venue requirements and there are staff to pay and it's all very expensive and everything. But I often think about the Writers' Festival, which buzzes here, full disclosure, I'm on the board, which buzzes here for 3 days over the weekend. And the thing that's incredible about it, yes, what happens in the rooms, but what happens outside the rooms, because some people come for 3 days and basically don't leave. And they just talk and talk and talk. And I think that sense of the third place where it doesn't matter what you're wearing. It doesn't, that there is accessibility, that there are free things to go to. I think that's where the arts in Auckland, and really thinking about how we design spaces to enable people to talk.
Why does it work for the Writers' Festival, not necessarily in other spaces that
Because people don't leave.
Yeah.
And it is a specifically unique feature of this venue, which we are so lucky to have for the festival, is that it's basically the mothership for 3 days. And people eat at the cafe there, or they bring their own or whatever.
So it's a one-stop shop sort of.
It's a one-stop shop, and you get 10 minutes to get between the next session or whatever.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you just sit it out and have a glass of wine and a yarn, I think it's the condensed kind of nature of a festival like that. I would love to see our foyers and our art spaces become places where people... I came out of David Byrne a few weeks ago, which was an extraordinarily joyous concert, and not to rag on downtown Auckland, but there wasn't a bar open for love nor money, and all I wanted to do was sit down with my brother and talk about how amazing that gig was. And I think we miss a little bit of that, and that is partially the way this city, particularly the central city, is designed. But we do tend to just pour out of places, get in our cars and go home.
Isn't that partly to do with the fact that we have devices we want to get back to and TV shows that we're watching, all those things that actually disconnect us?
Oh, totally. It was honestly, if I could set my phone on fire and throw it in the ocean, I would, but I can't because there's a lot of my life on it. But yeah, that's absolutely it. And that's a well-documented phenomenon. But I think people are lonely, and I think when we have that kind of sense of loneliness or fear or anxiety being weaponised to the advantage of certain people and factions, I think pushing against that by looking at the arts and what it can offer in terms of alternative third spaces is something to think about.
That's absolutely right. Helena, what would you do? What can be done to actually give us an example of a space that's not working that well, in your view? That could work
Full
better.
disclosure, this is where I work.
But we've heard good things about this, so you don't need to worry about this place.
But it's interesting. It's sort of less about what doesn't work and more about the conversation about what's going on in the city around us at the moment that actually probably a more valuable one to pick up right now. Because I think we all know the pandemic challenged the central city greatly. As a consequence, many, many people now don't want to be here, don't want to come in. They've got an idea of what it's like, and it really frightens them. But a lot of that is talk and not necessarily reflective of what's actually going on in the central city. And I think I was thinking a lot about, because third spaces is exactly where I wanted to go as well. Free programming is all about the third space in Aotea Square or in Te Komititanga or other spaces like that. And they are spaces that people choose. They choose to be in. That's not necessarily about what we might do in them. They're just places they can be. They don't have to spend money. They don't have to ask for a permission to be there. People can be there. The more interesting thing is how much more we need to and are working on amplifying and bringing arts and activations into these spaces so that more people come. Right now we've got a third space out in Aotea Square which is humming because people feel and see and can hear the art and they feel like they want to be with more people. And I think that's part of what happens with these third spaces is that people want to be together and feel safe in an epidemic of loneliness, as you so rightly say. That's the real value of these important spaces that we have across the city. There's just not necessarily enough of them.
How do we fix this, Emily? What's the solution?
Simple question. So I go back to some of the key points on one of the final slides that Adrian showed, which is what can we learn from the research that provides pathways or ins for us to better leverage our investment in arts and culture and combine what we have. So if the pie is not growing larger, how do we get better at using the pie, essentially? And a key way that we are doing that across Tamaki Makaurau with some of the folks here is co-investment approaches. So thinking about what are some of these big problems, how do we bring people back to the city centre? That's not a singular. There's no single answer that sits there. There's an arts and culture angle to that. There are different aspects of activation. There are different aspects of infrastructure that need to be answered, as well as transport. So I think thinking collectively about what role we can play and how we can make our investments in answering these questions go as far as possible is definitely part of the answer for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do we need to think about differently if we want arts to survive here, Hami Order? If we want it to survive and thrive?
I think, it's really interesting being in this building particularly, kind of having this conversation, because a lot of my early curatorial practice was kind of longing for connection or living memory to place. I think a lot of the dancing in the street or the third place that we talk about actually is connected to your first question around intergenerational relationships and living relationships to place. I think, Auckland has always been a place of convergence. Tāmaki Herenga Waka, even before some of the last waka arrived, has always been a meeting place and a confluence of different people. I think part of answering how do we engage community to return to place is to ensure that the memories they have, they want to create more of, share with their descendants or their whānui, and feel that sense of belonging. I think that's why festivals work, because it's a date in the calendar that people anticipate and look forward to. They know, they're consistent. When I think of the Pride Fest Out West team who are here and the work that they've done with Trinity Ice, with banding together a whole region, multiple local boards, to put forward Pride Fest Out West, it's because of that consistency and the kind of dedication they have to the constituents or the people that live in the area. I think of, interdigenation that used to happen here, the kind of turn of the 90s when K Road, the sort of start of the Pacific Sisters and this idea of urban spread, and how K Road as an identity hasn't shifted from that. And I think K Road really, with the impact of the City Rail link, with Bereford Square, with the move on orders, I really question what memories people are going to be making to place and what we might lose in some of what's spoken in this around nuisance, around the shutting of library hours, around the reduction of grant funding. So I think as much as we need arts institutions and organisations to invest and continue to grow the programming they offer, we also need our city to participate and to be willing to make those memories and to be willing to catch the bus and the train and the inconvenient Uber and to stay late, because they know that that's part of the identity of the city.
Yeah, absolutely. I see you nodding there. Adrian, what are you thinking?
I was struck actually by the importance of the accessibility of the arts, whether it's financial accessibility or disability accessibility or simply approximation of it, that it's somewhere that you can get to, but it's also somewhere that you feel welcome, somewhere that you are able to be supported, whether it's as a performer or as an audience member or as someone enjoying the arts. I don't know, for some reason I was thinking about when I arrived in London with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we had £2,000 between us, and we spent $1,200 on the bond on our flat, and we suddenly had to find work and we couldn't do anything anywhere, and then we realised galleries were free. Public installations were free, and I think we had that sudden connection with things that could open our mind, and suddenly London wasn't this fishbowl that you were looking in on, but you could actually be part of it. And that accessibility of the arts in so many ways, I think, is critical to its success.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I want to bring that up with Helena. How we support theatres in galleries, and like how do we ensure access to these spaces?
It's a really it's a good question, because what you have is very large cultural assets, very large buildings that cost an awful lot of money to run and to maintain, but they are incredible cultural taonga for a city. If you go to any major city, major cultural city in the world, the things that you hope to see when you're there are these incredible cultural assets that draw you, be it the galleries in London, be it the theatres you might find in Paris or Chicago or Sydney. And these are places which I think there has been a little bit of a shift in recent years to expect that these types of assets for the population will somehow pay for themselves, which they can't ever. That is not how these buildings work, and that is not the value that we can expect from them. So I think this is where there's this really interesting kind of thorny back and forth conversation about how do we ensure that venues, theatres, be they small, be they large, galleries that are incredibly important to the identity of the people of the place that they live in, that they aren't being shut down and closed off because they become too expensive to run. So there are an awful lot of people working on this, and this is where something like a local government, like Auckland Council, are very, very important in this mix. And ensuring that the conversation about why the arts is valuable, not just as a revenue generator, although that too, if you're in the case of putting on large-scale musicals, which I see are quite impactful from what I hear, but these large-scale cultural offers that help us land ourselves in where we are, they are going to require subsidy and support always. And I might just hand this over to Emily now, because as Auckland Council, who supports many of these venues and galleries, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Thank you, Helena. Indeed, so Auckland Council is the largest investor in arts and culture infrastructure within Tamaki Makaurau, and without the spaces and places for the arts to take place, we have very little arts taking place through the gallery door. But I feel I would like to table another aspect of the arts that I think is really important here as we talk about ticketed events and formal infrastructure, and that is public art. So that's public art that takes place in our public places, that is accessible all the time, 24 hours a day, and it really helps fulfill our strategic aim of integrating arts and culture into the everyday lives of Aucklanders. So one of the case studies that's highlighted in the research is Jaden Flavel's po, Te Manu Karewa, which is situated right outside of the Manurewa Library. And the po, Te Manu Karewa, tells the story of the naming of Manurewa through iwi narrative, through elevating Mātauranga Māori and threading a Te Ao Māori worldview throughout place. So part of what I love about that work itself is you have the library there, and you have families using the library, and you have families who are now provided an activation and activity sheet if they'd like to learn more about the po and about their place. And when you think about that circular experience, this is a way that we're bringing arts and culture out of the doors of our incredibly important pieces of infrastructure that support the arts formally, but into the everyday lives of Aucklanders through just free, accessible experiences in community. And we've touched on the city centre today, and that's a very important part of our arts ecosystem. But I think it's also important to remember that Tamaki Makaurau is a huge space, and arts and culture needs to happen all through the region in many places. So just wanted to call attention to that as well.
Let's talk a little bit about how we ensure that it's not just a small number of our population, small percentage of our population that understands the value of arts. How do we see the relationship between economic benefit and the more intangible values, things like identity, connection, and belonging? How do we talk about those and make people want to go into these spaces, want to partake in them? Hamiora, I hau whakaaro.
I have a unique privilege, I guess, of within our creation story, we hear of the great ascent of Tārenui Arangi, retrieving the 3 baskets of knowledge, te kite tuauri, te kite tuatia, and te kite aronui. None of those 3 are separate. Of course, it takes all 3, the practice, the unseen, and the shown. But an understanding of the arts or the value of a person is expressed in the tuakiritanga or the ahure of the people they come from. The waiata that you learn and you sing, the reo or the mita that you hold and carry, the whakairo of your po and your tipuna is unique to who you are and where you're from. And I think the value of the arts is intrinsic to a society because it's an opportunity for you to articulate part of where you're from. Places, cultural capitals like New York and London who have their theatres are born out of social kind of practices of the theatre. They don't just go, oh, we're going to build a giant theatre. The city is built around the populace. So I think it's really interesting to ask Auckland, who are we and how does our art practice show up? What does it look like to, as we've seen by, comparisons from Manawatu Taonga, invest in Te Matatini, what is... when we talk about our cultural capital, what is our cultural capital? Who are we as a city? And what are the spaces that we need? I can't quite remember the question, but that's really where I was.
I love the answer anyway. Yeah, it does. It makes me think about, because actually this has come up from all of you really, is, how do we plan our cities? And when we're in that town planning phase, and, of course, a lot of that's already happened. We've got the hard institutions in there and all that. So, but how do we make our cities now accessible where they haven't necessarily continued the idea of building around our arts institutions? How do we bring people back? Like Honey Tuabi, like this is the city that we live in. Can I
just jump in on the value stuff, right? Like, how do you... So, I would dearly love not to be sitting here in 5 years having another conversation about how the arts matters, because I have been having that conversation within my various phases of career. I started during the heyday of the creative industries discourse, the Helen Clark kind of cultural injection halcyon days, where we were all hooning pretty hard on some academic stuff that came out of the UK, Richard Florida kind of style, about how there was gold in them their hills, in the creative industries, right? So that was a big thing. And then I worked in sponsorship and development, raising money for Auckland Theatre Company. And one of the things that I think fundamentally has to change is that we need to increase capability within the arts and culture sector. Like, having the sales pitch, the reason that we have to keep talking about why the arts matter and why we should continue, paying for them through our rates or our taxes or whatever justification we have to give the TPU when they're like, why are the Film Commission flying to, film festivals, or, it's constantly under attack from a value for money point of view. And there's a misunderstanding about, the fact that this country, that it should be user pays. We're just not big enough, right? We do not have the scale for that. And so there is always going to be government or local government subsidy. But I think the sector itself has to get more help at getting better at telling its own story, has to get better at doing things like feedback surveys and data and insights kind of stuff. There's a real capacity gap in the arts and culture sector in this country. And I think in terms of growing the pie, we have a big thing staring down the barrel of us in a city like Auckland, which is what happens to philanthropic giving when a generation or two of people who have done that in a particular way are no longer around, and we haven't taught the next generations how to do it. So, I think in terms of arts access, it really is about how do we find a way to invest in the sector to allow them to A, grow the pie, and B, tell their story better, so that maybe we don't have to keep having this conversation every time there's a change of government.
Such a good point. It is absolutely I think that's at the root of the discussion, really, is why do we need to keep having these discussions? But what we should do is come up with a question that we really like for the next conversation that we have. Hamiora, you were going to add something?
I guess I was just going to say one thing that we try and always, at Auckland Pride, we only work with our artists for, I guess, a concerted effort, to erect something within the February festival. But I think as Takatapu and Rainbow community members, a lot of the storytelling that they bring forth is authentic. It's about who they are as people, and it is place-based. And one thing I always struggle with when we see arts and culture and budgets or, seen as the separate thing, we are seeing transport and civic transformation at the moment with CRL, and those whare that have been built and designed by artists alongside architects, that is art and design. I think it's really dangerous when we start separating it. What is the All Blacks uniform without art and culture and design behind it? What is the local park without the plan? So I think artists are problem solvers, and to Emily's point before, it's about including that problem solving from the onset. What is the problem? How can creativity solve it across transport, across water care? What I think creative thinking, to harken back, actually is a great export for New Zealand. We do see the brain drain. It's a conscious decision that people in my generation make to stay and not go to London and not work for agencies and not continue to kind of exist in this colony framework. So I think
therefore not make money.
And therefore not make money here. Yeah. So I think it's important that we consider arts and culture as performing arts, as galleries, as public art, but also as creative thinking across many sectors.
Well, we've got a question from the audience, which is, I think this is a good time to bring this up, and perhaps Emily or Adrian can take this one. How can we achieve the bold ambition expressed by our Deputy Mayor with stagnant and or declining financial support for the sector?
I'll make a start, a very tentative start. I think in the work that we do, we're often asking the question, how do we take this further? How do we scale this up? And the first response that always comes back is we need more money. And that is true, but I think we also need to think about what goes with the money. What's the relational support that we're providing people? What's the capability support that we're providing? What's the connections across different systems and organisations that can actually magnify and amplify the impact of what we're seeing? I think too that there's a little bit of, if you like, blind faith that's needed in arts investment, that actually, money was put into basement and that nurtured the Rose Matafeos and the other great artists, Sam Sneddon and others that have come out of there. So there is that act of faith that what we're doing is really important, not just for today, but actually for the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I love that incubation. It was the place of incubation for so many of our artists. Emily, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, just to expand on something that Adrian touched on, so part of the research findings are indeed that money is important. Grants are important, funding is important, but as important, if not more important, are the brokering of relationships, are the wayfinding through systems, are the partnerships that people like, I'm going to call you out in the audience, but Anna Ray, who was the project manager for the work that I discussed earlier, Te Mano Karewa, it's shown in the case study that the support and skill of people like Anna and the relationships that they hold with helping our artists develop and move through these processes is key and critical and of value. So indeed, more money would be great, but in the absence of more money, there are still ways to forge ahead. And in addition to that brokering of relationship side, thinking about, as investors, what can we do to make our dollars go the furthest is really important. And we kind of skipped over data-driven decision-making, but to your point, it is incredibly important, and it's something that we need to do better. And that's a huge strategic focus of mine. It's articulated in Toi Fitiki as one of our strategic shifts. How do we create the systems so that we can collect that data, qualitative, quantitative, so that we can tell these stories, so that we are not sitting sitting here in 5 years having the same conversation. We completely are all on the same page about that. So in terms of how we can garner more investment, broadly, one way to do that is to talk about your impact well with a unified voice, and that's part of what this research does.
A good question when we're talking about money. How important is the underground scene? Most council funds go to established channels. How are we nurturing grassroots initiatives, and why do they matter? Helena? You don't have to. We can pass it down.
This is the stuff I love. So the underground scene is where it all starts. In many ways, we can't have what we have. We can't have the Jesus Christ Superstars if we haven't had the. I'm not even going to try and turn that into some funny thing, but we haven't had the artists who are doing work in a very, very experimental, cutting-edge, avant-garde space, because that is the stuff that is taking the art forward. And we must always, and I hope we will always, support those artists as much as we can. We do not do enough in New Zealand, but where we can ensure that we are clearing the way, because they are often the canary in the mine as far as showing us what stories and what people actually want to hear and see reflected back about themselves. To whether and how that particular genre, that form, those artists are being supported, that's one I don't know if I can resolve easily. I work in a very mainstream venue, and that's not our place in the ecosystem. But there are brilliant organisations like Basement, amongst others, for whom that is their space and their place in the ecology. And we just need to ensure that that funding continues to go to them so that they can continue to keep that seed bed rich and fertile.
Hamiora, what might stronger career pathways for artists look like?
Yeah, I think this flows on from that question as well, because, speaking to Auckland Pride, we have a program called Proud Centres, which throughout the month of February and in the lead up to the event, the venue hireage fee is cut for events that are being held within the Auckland Pride Festival. And we see every year in the Auckland Pride Festival around 60% of our event organisers are first-time event organisers. So Auckland Pride is often the place where emerging and underrepresented artists kind of cut their teeth. And through the Proud Centres initiative, they're able to create meaningful partnerships with the like of Jess Kelly and the wonderful Pride Fest Out West team, who go on to nurture those relationships throughout the year when it's no longer Pride Festival. The questions and the practice and the bringing of people together that they continue to answer within their libraries and community centres are then put up at Basement Theatre, when it's time and when they feel confident to put a ticket price on a show. So the future careers or better kind of trajectory for artists, I think, is around understanding that these venues do exist, this pipeline is laid out for you, and we really see our role as Auckland Pride as walking those next generations of artists through that pipeline, and our goal is that through the festival, people experience that same consistent pipeline and tell their friends and tell their, they become tuakana, they tell their teina, they go from Proud Centres to Basement in the Open Access Festival to Q Theatre at Pride Elevates to Auckland Live, they're then the Jesus Christ Superstar. And, that is really the goal. The goal is that they can and they will. And we're starting to see some of that in the Kitua festival. Rosanna Raymond returned as our senior artist. We have a tuakana artist every festival, and she reflected that the 2001, I want to say, I'm looking at Helena because she was there, Hero Party, where she was the angel, was the first time that she ever performed in her life, and so many years later to then have her as a senior artist, in Pride and returning back, it's always happened in that pipeline, but I think being cognizant of that and wanting to nurture that is our job, really. But disseminating that to artists. Tell your friends, get them to become members so we can work with them. If you've been to the festival and you experience it and you enjoy it, come on board, because we do the work year round. All festivals do. And that's the goal, I think.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Now we have talked about, what does it look like? We're going to stop asking the same question all again. Over and over again. If we're sitting here again in 5-10 years, what would need to have changed for us to say Auckland has truly become a great arts city, Adrian?
I think picking up on the conversations we've had so far, it is that we see the city full and celebrating the arts at any time of the year.
But what would have changed for that to happen?
I think that alongside the investment, we've also thought about what sits alongside the investment. What is making this grow and bringing the people in, bringing the intergenerational connection. That it's that there's an arts ecosystem that is truly connected and flourishing, and that people feel a part of it, and whether as an audience or a performer or as an art installer. Yeah.
Anna, what would need to change to make this a truly great arts city?
I think the city, and to Hamiora's earlier point around not siloing arts and culture out here, but the city as a whole, there needs to be a cohesion around the story that it's telling, and I think that isn't just about the arts and culture sector. I think that's about your night out in Auckland, or it's about your weekend away in Auckland, or it's about what's happening in your particular community on any given weekend. We have a lot of bodies and organisations involved in the sector, and then they're part of a larger body and organisation and all the rest of it. And it feels, at times, to me anyway, quite disjointed around if I'm a person who's visiting the city, or if I'm a person that lives in this city, whether it be Central City or in Manurewa, to understand what that is to me as an audience member. What could I do? What can I do? How, what is the central proposition of that from the point of view of, the people that live here and the people that visit? And I think, that's, maybe it's a pipe dream, but I think a lot more people who are not potentially involved in those conversations at the moment should be involved in those conversations, whether it be our hospitality sector, and I'm sure they are plugged into this, but, the sort of the local government, national government stuff, the CNZ, everybody is definitely talking all the time, don't get me wrong, but the sort of the coherence around the strategy, and I think also just really putting the audience and the person who's trying to figure stuff out at the heart of it is probably quite a good place to start too.
What are you thinking, Helena?
I agree. Oh, did you say Emily?
Okay, no. Let's start with you, Emily, and then we'll go to Helena.
No, Helena, please begin.
No, you go. Go for it, Emily.
Sorry. Building on what you just said, and acknowledging the marketing side, there's a lot of work going on right now around how we can tell a more cohesive story and how we can make it more navigatable for Aucklanders to understand what's going on. Indeed, there's lots of streams to this, and I won't dive into the detail of it, but I completely agree that part of the solution here is for people across the region to be able to go to a space and understand what the arts and culture offering is for them. I'll add another layer of thought, which comes to me around this conversation, and part of what needs to change and that we're moving towards is the idea of equity, and thinking about whose voices are heard and platformed and whose voices are not heard and platformed, and what does that look like today and what will that look like into the future. So I'm not going into too much detail and answering that right now, but I think that for us to be a city and a region of arts and culture, we need to have all voices heard, identity, spaces for cultural identity to be expressed, and ways for that community connection to play out through arts and culture. And that's about understanding where the gaps and opportunities are and how we can move to meet them.
What is our offering? How do we define our identity at the moment as an arts community in Auckland? What would you say to that, Helena?
Well, I think that's the question. I don't think we have but it would be a difficult thing to do, to get one statement that covered all of the sectors because it's so diverse and it's so incredibly multifaceted.
What's the nature of it, though? I mean, Hamiora, you talked about it earlier. You know, what is our identity in the arts in Tāmaki?
I mean, I feel really lucky. To answer your question earlier, I think Tāmaki is a great art city. You know, I wake up every day and go to my job so excited to hear the dreams and aspirations of these rangatahi. The works that we get to put on, the public art team, the Q, Auckland Live. For a lot of our members and a lot of our artists who are still in the underground, they live that and they breathe that. I think it's it takes them to travel and tour internationally to receive validation to then come home. So I think there's I wouldn't know how to define it. I know what it looks like for the people that I'm closest to. It's joy, it's indigenous knowledge systems, it is a kata, it's a laugh, it's ironic, it's funny. You know, we know what it is to be a Kiwi, we know what it is to be an Aucklander, and I think owning that and being really proud of it. You know, each year our festival does a theme in response to what we hear at the AGM and what we hear through post-festival reports. And last year, the festival just been was Ngā Uriye, around being a descendant of a movement, honouring the 40th anniversary of homosexual law reform and bringing together intergenerational knowledge exchange. And out of the gutter at Myers Park, we saw 5 generations sharing a stage. So to me, that is really joyous. That makes us a great art city. You know, we bring people across through Pride Connects and satellites from around the Pacific, and they talk about Auckland as leading Indigenous knowledge systems and as Indigenous bodies not having processes of porphyry where they're from.
Yeah.
So we do lead in many ways. I think we just don't tell the story of it.
That's what I'm thinking. It's not an identity crisis we have on our hands. It's a storytelling one. And Helena, I think you want to add something here.
I just want to put 2 things in there. You asked about what would it take. Two areas that I'd love to throw in there, and one is I'd love to see arts back in the curriculum of primary schools right across the region, back across the Motu actually, because that's one of the biggest challenges we have is our young people are coming through and it is no longer prioritised because the teachers no longer have the time or the ability to teach them. That is showing up in the way that people show up in our creative spaces, the lack of civics, sometimes the joy and the incredible love that they have for creative experiences that they see out in some of these third spaces is astonishing because normally they'd have got that in a school environment and they're not getting it in the same way. So one thing. Second thing, this is a boring thing, but it would make a huge difference and would come to what you're talking about, Adrian. It's about reviewing the regulatory framework for our central city about if we want to be a city that actually prioritises creativity and live music and artists, we need to dig into the back end about noise restrictions and 11 o'clock closing and public transport that doesn't actually connect up when the theatres come down. That would make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have to start wrapping up, but I want to invite each of you to make a brief closing reflection. It could be anything that you want to add, but one suggestion might be, what's one small decision by a council, a funder, a venue, or even an audience member that could make the biggest difference to the arts in Auckland? Adrian.
I think really investing in the relationship brokers alongside the artists themselves so that actually they can find their footing as an artist and be able to take their work more widely. That would be mine.
Awesome, thank you.
I think for me... can I think a little longer?
Yes, absolutely you can. Well, we're going to throw you under the bus there, Emily. It literally can be any reflection that you would like to... What's the key thing you want everyone to leave with tonight, Emily?
The key takeaway for me from Arts Matter, from the research and the conversation here, is that the value of arts and culture is layered and it's alive and it's about community, it's about social outcomes, and it's about economic outcomes. And all of those are very important. All of those speak to different audiences in different ways, and we need all of them in order to create a city that we want to live in and that will attract and retain talent. But for me, leaving this conversation, what I hope has been imparted through this today is that there's no one simple singular way to value the arts, that it's broad, and that it's for everybody. It's through all of these art forms, it's in all of these places, and hopefully you can see yourself and your work or something that you love and you've been able to connect through via arts and culture represented here on the stage or through the work. So vitally important, and this is a space where we've come through with a body of research that really speaks to that importance.
Okay, thank you. Anna.
I would say this as a person who has an obnoxious job title like audience strategist, but we talk a lot about, in my line of work, audience first approach, and quite often that's interpreted as really understanding your audience, but I would challenge anybody to think about the reverse, which is who is not your audience and why.
Mm.
I would like, my final thought is that the thing that always astonishes me about Auckland is just what an unbelievable taonga we have in our arts and cultural sector. I relocated here 13, 14 years ago from a place that considers itself the cultural capital of New Zealand, a city I love dearly, but I got up here and I could not believe what was happening here because the storytelling was so poor, and I think if we had one shot at telling our stories better and helping our wider community and population understand just how astonishing our artists and makers are here in Tamaki Makaurau from right across the region, that would be an incredible thing.
Absolutely. Have I missed anyone? Adrian, you said you've okay, excellent, great, thank you. Brilliant. Thank you all very much. We do have to leave it there, and there is so much more to say. And actually, Anna, did you have any thoughts about a better question for next time? And by better, I mean that's subjective. We do have to keep asking why arts matter. We know that. But is there another question that you were thinking of as we were sitting here? Like, actually, you know what I'd really love to discuss next time is X. And maybe not just putting Anna on the spot. Anyone else got thoughts?
No, but yes, but it's just a repeat of what I said last time, is that I would love to know, not right now, FYI, but I would love to know what you think, and I would love to know what the people out there think. I think it's great that we have these conversations, but yeah, the concept of different voices, other voices, I think is great.
Yeah. There's something in that. What is the change that needs to be made to share the stories that we know make up the identity of our arts communities, our arts sector, and how important and powerful it is, and how change-making it can be. Last word to you, Emily.
Well, I feel like the comments I just made earlier are kind of closing it out, but the arts matter, the arts are critical, and the arts are vital. They're not a nice to have. And I'd love to hear, like you just said, Anna, it'd be wonderful to have a two-way dialogue around what you found, that you heard tonight, that resonated with you, and what you found from the research that you'll be able to use and drive forward within your own mahi. So, kia ora.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa mō koutou whakaaro I tēnei pōwhakahirehira. Ngā mihi. Paki mai I te whānau. So we do thank all of our panellists. There are a few themes that have emerged from our conversation. The arts, as we know, they shape identity and belonging. They strengthen our communities. They help us imagine the future of our city. There are some challenges. We know that there are always challenges, and this is the awesome meaty part of why our sector does do so well, because we're not afraid to lean into those challenges and to have those discussions and to understand where it is that we need to put our focus and our attention. And that might be around issues that have come up this evening about bars and cafes and closing times, about noise limits, about making sure that our foyers are filled after the event and that we're still discussing them and that we're able to tell the story of who we are. The answers are as diverse as the challenges. So we need to make sure that all voices are invited to this kōrero. And I love that question too. Who is not your audience? And well, I think that's a really powerful question that we can each ask ourselves. So once again, I'd like to thank our panellists, Adrian Field, Hamiora Bailey, Emily Trent, Anna Rafferty Connell, and Helena Keeley. Another round of applause, please, for our amazing panellists. E ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa e te whānau. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, here in the room and to the whānau online. Your presence alone, it does actually mean something. It means that arts do matter. And we'd like to invite you to look at the arts activity after this, which is right on our doorstep. So as you head away this evening, there is activity in and around Aotea Square for Auckland Arts Festival and public artwork Waimahara, which is just behind Aotea Square in the underpass to Myers Park. Waimahara is by artist Graham Tipene. It's an interactive artwork designed to deepen our connection to place, which links very well into the kōrero that we've had this evening. And, oh yes, when you sing one of two specially written waiata into the sensor in the space, the artwork will sing back to you. So another connection to the magic of engaging with arts and culture. So do, if you have the time after this event, make sure that you engage with our art around the city. But to close our evening, I'd like to invite back now Matua Richard Nahi to offer a final karakia as we wrap up our evening together. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou.
E te tūhine Miriamu e mihi nui atu ki a koe, te arahi tanga ki a tātou, te arahi ki tā tātou whānau, me te kaupapa katoa. Tēnā koe. So ladies and gentlemen, just really acknowledging our Master of Ceremony for the evening, Miriam Kamo. Homai te pakapaka. E te atua ke konei mātu e mihi akanira ki a koe mō tā tātou hui hui rangatira. Te tainga mai ngā kai kōrero ka puta. Tā rātou mōhiotanga ki a tātou e pāna tēnei kaupapa rangatira. Nā reira mihi nei rā ki tā tātou whānau, tā rātou tainga mai i tēnei pō ki te tautoko ake te karanga, nā reira kua tai mai tā rātou wehinga ki te kāinga. So nā reira mihi nei rā ki a koe mō tēnā i roti i tō tātou ariki. So this karakia was to really acknowledge our gathering tonight and extending an appreciation to all of you who have come, and may your journey back home be safe and be with your families tonight. Kia ora mai tātou. Kia ora. Thank you.